Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at market risk,
Okay.
specifically how it's affecting small, medium-sized enterprises.
Yeah.
Those SMEs over in Slovakia.
Slovakia, yeah.
And we've got this interesting academic paper we're diving into. It analyzes survey data from like 164 of these SMEs in the Helena region.
Interesting. Yeah. What region?
Helena.
Okay.
And get this, over 80%, I mean, a huge majority of those business owners, they said market risk is like their biggest concern right now, their biggest business risk.
Wow, 80%, huh? That's significant.
It is, right? So think of this deep dive as, kind of a crash course. We'll unpack what this paper found, what it all means, especially if you're, in a management role.
Right, makes sense.
And they even offer up this whole methodology for managing market risk better.
Oh, interesting. So they don't just point out the problem, they offer solutions.
Exactly.
That's great. Now, I'm curious, did they just, get people's opinions, or did they actually dig deeper?
Oh, they went way beyond just like, asking for opinions.
Okay.
They combined their survey with some serious number crunching statistical analysis. See if there's, any relationship between how big a company is and how they see market risk.
So they're looking for patterns, right?
Yeah.
Like, do bigger companies see it differently than smaller ones?
Exactly. So first things first, let's break down this whole market risk idea. The paper, it uses a bunch of different definitions. They even pull one from Lamb and Hampton.
Okay.
But the big takeaway is it's not just about, what's happening on the stock market.
Right. It's broader than that.
Way broader.
Yeah.
It's about all those external factors, all those forces outside your company's control that can really mess with your ability to, actually sell your products or services.
Makes sense. So things that are, like, completely outside of your control.
Yeah, it can feel that way sometimes, right?
Yeah, definitely. And in this paper, it specifically focuses on marketing and business risks as opposed to just the purely financial ones. So we're talking about, like, maybe customer demand changes. All of a sudden, nobody wants what you're selling anymore.
Right.
Or new competitors pop up out of nowhere. Or maybe your distribution channels, they fall apart.
Oh, yeah. Or even you totally miss the mark with your pricing.
Pricing, yeah, absolutely. That's a big one. You set the price too high, nobody buys. You set it too low, you're not making any profit.
Right. It's a balancing act. And they even mention this needs risk.
Needs risk. What's that?
It's basically the risk that what your customers want or even need, like, fundamentally changes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, like their needs evolve. And if you're not paying attention,
You're in trouble. Makes you realize how much is really outside a company's direct control.
Absolutely. And that's why this whole discussion, this deep dive, is so important, especially if you're in a management role.
Right.
Because you need to be able to see those shifts coming, anticipate them, and then be ready to adjust your strategy.
Be adaptable, for sure. And speaking of things that might surprise you, the survey results, they actually revealed something pretty interesting.
Oh, like what?
So going in, the researchers, they thought, okay, those micro and small businesses, those are going to be the ones hit hardest by market risk. They're the most vulnerable.
Yeah, seems logical. But when they crunch the numbers, it turns out it's actually the medium-sized companies that are feeling the heat the most, the ones with, 10 to 499 employees.
Huh. That's interesting. So not the smallest, but not the biggest either.
Yeah.
Sort of in the middle.
Right in that middle ground.
And any idea why that might be?
Well, the paper, it suggests a few reasons why that might be.
Okay.
So they point out that medium-sized companies, they often have less flexibility, less wiggle room in their operations compared to smaller, more agile businesses.
I see. They might be tied to, specific ways of doing things, specific production processes, or they've got these long-standing contracts with suppliers, and those are, those can be harder to change quickly.
Right. They're locked in.
Yeah.
So if something unexpected happens in the market, it's tougher for them to adjust.
Exactly. And on top of that, they might be really dependent on just a handful of key customers.
Oh, I see. So if those customers change their mind or want lower prices.
Exactly. It puts those medium-sized companies in a really vulnerable spot.
We're kind of stuck, aren't they?
Yeah. Kind of caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
Not as nimble as the smaller guys, and they don't have the same resources, the same market power as those giant corporations.
Right.
If you want to really see this laid out, there's a graph in the paper, figure 1, I think it is. It compares the average market risk perception across the different company sizes, and you can see this, like, clear spike for those medium-sized businesses.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to check that out. And are there, like, specific numbers to back that up?
Oh yeah. If you look at tables 1 and 3, it really hits home. The average market risk score for those tiny microenterprises is like 52.29.
Okay.
But for the medium-sized ones, it jumps up to 55.67.
Okay, so a noticeable difference.
And the interval estimates in table 3, they really just highlight that gap even more.
So what does this mean for someone in a management role then? What are the takeaways?
Well, I think it means if you're working in or even just with one of these medium-sized companies, you've got to be extra careful, extra vigilant about market risk.
Makes sense. So what can they do?
Well, you might need to, work harder to stay agile, like really focus on that.
Right.
Diversify your customer base so you're not so reliant on just a few.
Spread the risk.
Yeah. And maybe build in some buffer, some cushion when it comes to pricing and production capacity.
Okay, so be prepared for the unexpected. Got it.
Exactly. Now, the good news is the paper doesn't just, dump this scary statistic on us and leave us hanging.
Okay, good.
It goes on to identify 2 major barriers that companies face when they're trying to, get a grip on market risk. And this is where it gets really practical, really actionable.
Oh, perfect. Let's hear it.
So barrier number 1, lack of access to the right information. And that means both from, inside the company and from outside sources.
Okay, so not enough information to make good decisions. What's the second barrier?
The second one is they rely too much on past experience and intuition, like gut feeling, instead of, really turning to data and actually analyzing it.
So they're basically saying companies are flying blind when it comes to market risk.
Yeah, kind of. Not using data effectively to make those decisions.
It's like, you're trying to drive a car at night with your headlights off. You might know the road, but you're bound to hit something eventually. You're going to run into some trouble. Makes sense though, right? It's easy to fall back on what's worked before, especially I think when you're under pressure, You're stressed, you got to make a quick decision.
All right, you go with your gut.
Exactly. But like they're saying in the paper, in today's world, things change so fast.
Right. It's not your father's market anymore.
Exactly. You need more than just a hunch. You got to have solid data to back up your decisions.
Data-driven decisions. And that's where this 9-step methodology comes in, the one the paper lays out for managing market risk. It's a lot. It's pretty comprehensive. But there are a few steps in there, I think, that are fairly useful for anyone in, a management position.
Yeah, let's focus on those. The ones that are, really practical.
Yeah.
Actionable.
Exactly, the ones you can actually put to use. So step 1, and they really emphasize this, is all about setting a clear strategy. Having policies in place and making sure everyone knows who's responsible for what.
So everyone's on the same page right from the start.
Exactly. You need that buy-in from leadership, and everyone in the organization needs to understand this is a priority. Like, it can't just be a box you check off and then forget about it.
Right, it has to be part of the culture.
Yes. And the next step, they really hammer this home too, is analyzing your business environment. And I mean, like, really digging deep. Going beyond just what's happening inside your company.
So looking at the bigger picture, the whole landscape.
Right. Your industry, competitors, customers, all those external factors that could, make or break your success.
It's like connecting the dots, right? Seeing how all those external forces could potentially impact your specific business.
Exactly. Are there new technologies coming out, that could disrupt your whole industry? Are customer behaviors changing? Maybe they won't want your product or service anymore. These are the questions you got to be asking.
Stay ahead of the curve.
Right. And once you've got a handle on the potential risks, then you move on to step 3, prioritization. Because let's be honest, not all risks are created equal.
Right. Some are bigger deals than others.
Exactly. Some are more likely to happen, and some would, really do some damage if they did.
So you have to figure out which ones to focus on first.
Right. And that's where that data-driven approach really comes in. You have to look at each risk and assess, okay, what's the probability of this actually happening? And then if it did happen, what would the consequences be?
So you're not just guessing, you're actually using data to make informed decisions.
Exactly. And then finally, the paper stresses the importance of continuous monitoring and evaluation.
Okay, so you don't just do this once and then forget about it.
Right. Because the market, it's like a living thing. It's constantly changing. So your risk management approach, it has to adapt too.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing, more like constant vigilance.
Exactly. You need those feedback loops, regular check-ins, and you got to be willing to adjust your strategies.
Yeah.
Like, are the risks you identified back then, are they even relevant anymore? Are the things you're doing to mitigate them, are those things actually working? And what new risks have popped up that you didn't even see coming?
Lots of questions to ask.
Right. So I'm seeing a pattern here. Seems like the big theme, the overall message, is you got to be proactive and data-driven
Yeah.
when it comes to market risk management. You can't just rely on your gut.
Absolutely. It's like data is your compass and your map when you're navigating this crazy market landscape. And honestly, that's a message that resonates with anyone in a management role, I think, no matter what industry you're in, no matter how big or small your company is.
So the paper wraps up with this kind of call to action, urging those Slovakian SMEs to really revamp their approach to risk management, to become more proactive.
But I think that call to action, it goes way beyond just Slovakia. I
Yeah.
mean, in today's world, everything's so globalized, so interconnected, that effective market risk management, it's essential for any business that wants to not just survive, but actually thrive.
Right. It's not just about staying afloat anymore. It's about actually growing and succeeding.
Exactly.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener. We've talked about what market risk is, looked at the challenges those Slovakian SMEs are facing, and even dove into a practical methodology for tackling those risks. Now it's your turn. It's time to take this knowledge and actually apply it to your own work.
Here's a little challenge for you. Take some time this week to think about what we've discussed, what really stood out to you, what resonated, and most importantly, what concrete steps can you take starting today to improve how you manage market risk in your own work.
Remember, knowledge is only powerful when you actually use it. Don't let this information just sit there. Use it to make smarter decisions, create organizations that can roll with the punches, and ultimately be more successful in your work.
And what's really interesting? Even though this paper was focused on SMEs, the principles they lay out, the insights they offer, those apply to businesses of all sizes. I mean, whether you're a solopreneur or part of a massive corporation, understanding and managing market risk is crucial if you want to succeed in the long run.
It's universal.
It is. And the paper also talks about how important it is to cultivate a positive risk culture within your organization. It's not about creating a climate of fear, where everyone's afraid to make a mistake.
Right. Nobody wants to work in that kind of environment.
Exactly. It's more about, encouraging open communication, being willing to learn from mistakes, and actually empowering employees at all levels to speak up if they see a potential risk and be part of the solution.
It's about creating a culture where people feel safe speaking up.
Exactly. Because think about it. If your team is afraid to point out potential problems, if they're hesitant to raise concerns, you're way more likely to get blindsided by something unexpected.
You're caught off guard.
Exactly. But if you create an environment where people feel comfortable waving a red flag, saying, hey, I think we need to look at this, and then brainstorming solutions together, you can address those risks before they turn into major crises.
Proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. And the researchers also really emphasize that learning and adaptation, those are key when it comes to market risk management.
Always be learning.
Right. Because what works today might not work tomorrow. Technology's changing at lightning speed, markets are becoming more and more globalized, customer expectations are constantly shifting. So businesses need to stay ahead of the curve. They need to constantly refine their risk management strategies.
Keep up with the times.
Exactly. It's about staying informed about those emerging trends, looking for new tools and technologies that can help, and being open to trying new approaches.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Right. And here's something that I found really fascinating. The researchers point out that effective market risk management, it's not just about avoiding bad things.
That's not just about playing defense.
Exactly. It's also about seizing opportunities. Because when you're proactively identifying and assessing those potential risks, you can actually make smarter decisions about, investments, product development, even expanding into new markets.
So it's about playing offense, too.
Exactly. Understanding your risks can help you be bolder, help you capitalize on new trends, and ultimately gain a competitive advantage.
Get ahead of the game.
Right. Now, the paper also delves into a specific challenge faced by medium-sized enterprises, those with between 10 and 499 employees.
Right, we were talking about that earlier, the ones that seem to be hit the hardest by market risk.
Exactly. And their research suggests that these companies, they're often in a tricky spot.
Not quite big, not quite small.
Right. They're not as agile as the smaller businesses, and they don't have the same resources as the big corporations, so they can be particularly vulnerable to those market shifts.
Makes sense. If you're a tiny company, you can turn on a dime, change your pricing strategy, adapt really quickly.
Exactly. And if you're a massive corporation, you've got those deep pockets, you can weather the storm, or you've got the power to negotiate better deals with your suppliers. But those medium-sized companies, they're often caught in between. They face unique challenges when it comes to managing market risk.
Like they're in a no man's land.
Kind of, yeah. And the paper highlights some of the specific factors that contribute to that vulnerability. Things like less flexibility in their production and operations. They might be dependent on just a few key customers or suppliers, and they can struggle with capacity utilization and profitability.
So it's a whole bunch of different factors all coming together.
Right. It's a complex situation. And the paper also digs into some of the specific challenges those SMEs face when it comes to accessing information and making decisions. They found that a lot of businesses, they rely too heavily on past experience and intuition when it comes to market risk.
Going with their gut.
Exactly. And that can be a problem because, like we said before, markets are constantly changing. What worked in the past might not work today. So businesses, they need to embrace a more data-driven approach. Use analytics, use market intelligence to inform their decisions.
Let the data guide you.
Exactly. And they also found that a lot of SMEs struggle to even access the information they need to make good decisions about market risk.
So it's not just about using the data, it's about getting it in the first place.
Exactly. And that could be because they don't have the resources, they don't have access to the right tools, or maybe they're just not aware of how important market intelligence really is.
So lack of awareness is a big part of the problem.
It can be, yeah. And the paper's recommendation is that SMEs need to invest in building up their capacity for data analysis and market research.
So spend some money, get the right tools, hire the right people.
Exactly. Maybe they need to bring in a dedicated expert. Maybe they need to partner with an external consultant. Or maybe they just need to adopt some new tools and processes that are more data-driven. Whatever it takes, they need to make that investment.
So up your data game.
Yes. And the researchers also talk about the importance of communication and collaboration when it comes to managing market risk.
Working together.
Exactly.
Right.
They suggest that businesses, they need to break down those silos between departments, stop everyone from working in isolation, and encourage people to actually talk to each other about potential risks and opportunities.
Get everyone on the same page.
Exactly. And that could involve creating some cross-functional teams, scheduling regular meetings to talk about risks, or just fostering a culture of open communication where people feel comfortable sharing information and ideas.
Yeah, breaking down those walls. It seems like having that kind of open communication where everyone's involved, that can really make a difference. You catch things early before they turn into big problems.
Absolutely. It's about having a system in place, a culture where everyone feels like they can contribute, like their voice matters, not just the people at the top.
Right. Everyone's part of the solution.
Exactly. And the paper also talks about, the elephant in the room, globalization, and the huge impact that's having on business, and especially on risk management.
Right. You can't ignore that.
No, you can't. Because as markets get more and more interconnected, businesses, they face a whole new set of risks. Currency values going up and down, political instability in other countries, supply chain disruptions, even those shifts in what customers want, those can be driven by global trends now.
Yeah, it's like that butterfly effect, right? Something happens on the other side of the world, and it can have these ripple effects that impact your business, things you never even saw coming.
Exactly. So businesses, they need to start thinking globally when it comes to risk management. They can't just focus on what's happening in their own backyard.
Right, they need to broaden their perspective.
Exactly. Maybe that means having operations in different countries, spreading the risk, or developing backup plans just in case there's some kind of political upheaval somewhere, or even just, keeping up with what's happening in the global economy and in politics, staying informed.
So you're not caught flat-footed.
Right. It's about recognizing that you're not just competing with the businesses down the street anymore. You're competing with companies all over the world.
It's a global marketplace.
It is. And that brings us to, I think, the paper's main message, the need for proactive and adaptive risk management. They're basically saying that in today's world, things are changing so fast that businesses, they can't afford to just sit back and wait for something to happen.
Right, you can't just react. You have to anticipate.
Exactly. They need to be looking ahead, trying to identify potential risks, and then coming up with strategies to deal with those risks. And they have to be flexible, ready to adjust their plans as new information comes in.
Agile, adaptable, always learning.
That's it. That's the key. It's about thriving in the face of uncertainty.
So, big picture, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners, the things they can actually do, in their own organizations?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember that market risk is just part of doing business. It's always going to be there. So it's not about being afraid of it. It's about understanding it and knowing how to manage it.
Right, make it your friend.
Exactly. And second, I think the paper really makes the case that you need to be proactive, you need to be strategic, and you need to use data to drive your decisions.
Don't just wing it.
Right. Third, create that risk-aware culture within your company. Make sure people can speak openly, empower your employees to identify and report risks, and create an environment where learning is valued, where mistakes are seen as opportunities to improve.
A culture of continuous improvement.
Exactly. And finally, never forget that managing risk is an ongoing process. It's a journey, not a destination. Things are constantly changing, so you always need to be adapting, learning, and evolving.
Never stop learning. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this deep dive into market risk. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a great discussion.
And remember, whether you're in Slovakia or anywhere else in the world, understanding and managing market risk is absolutely crucial if you want to build a business that can weather any storm. Until next time.